Good afternoon all. Thanks for coming for the Institute seminar. Today we have Dr. Nilesh Mehta. So he received his BTech degree from Electronics and Communication Engineering from IIT Madras and MS and PhD from in Electrical Engineering from California Institute of Technology, USA. Okay, and he is a co-inventor of 30 plus US patents. He also served on the board of governors of the IEEE Communication Society as member at large during 2014 and 2015 as a director of conference publication during 2012 and 2013. I know most of you are publishing in IEEE translations, communication or wireless or even letters. If you have some doubts, you can always approach him. What is the proper way to get through your manuscript published in IEEE? I know it's not an easy task, but he can help you out in that part as well. Okay, and he's a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences. He's a recipient of Swarna Jayanti Fellowship, Hari Om Ashram Merit Vikram Sarabhai Research Award, Nasi Scopus Young Scientist Award, and INE Young Engineer Award. He also serves as an editor of IEEE Translations and Communication and as an executive editor of IEEE Translations and Wireless Communication. So let's welcome him for the seminar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to know what sort of a crowd I am talking to. So, how many of you are undergrads? Can you just raise your hand? Very good. How many are masters? How many are faculty? PhDs? The rest are faculty. Okay. Okay. So what I do today is talk about a fairly broad area in wireless. It's a class of techniques. It's not a single problem, but a class of problems that arises in many wireless communication systems. And this thing is called pointers getting problems. So anyways, it's called opportunistic selection, and I'll give you examples to clarify what I mean. And the reason why I chose this topic is it's a very intuitive thing to do. You will see when I talk about it. But also you will see that there are lots of very interesting research problems that arise when I discuss it. So the background that I'm assuming is fairly minimal. I do not assume that you know much about wireless, except that I do assume that you're convinced that wireless is useful. So I hope you're all users of wireless communication systems. So hopefully you'll see the problems and appreciate them. So I'll start off fairly simple. I've tried to cut down as much of the math behind it as possible, but there's a lot of fairly serious research that goes on behind this. So here's the first problem, and this is the problem that your cell phone systems routinely solve every millisecond or so, which is basically called the scheduling problem. So basically there's a cell phone tower, which is shown in the cartoon there. And there are lots of users 1, 2 and 3 here. And the cell phone tower has to basically figure out whom to serve. Over time it has to serve all of the users, but at any point in time it has to make a call about whom to transmit information to. And how does it go about doing this? Well, a simple way to do this, and this is what was done for many years. For example, in 2G, essentially this is what was done. You would first transfer to the first user. So this is called the round robin approach, a very natural thing to do. Then the second user, then the third user. Now this is old-fashioned or outdated for a very simple reason, that in wireless communication systems, what is given is the following, that the channel never remains the same. It changes. In fact, it changes very rapidly. Every few tens of milliseconds, you've got a new channel. So the way you want to visualize it is, there's a channel, and I've shown some cartoon traces for different. Just hold on for a minute. What I've shown there is traces for what different users, the channels for how the different users will look. What you want to take away from it is a larger channel is a case where you get high data rates, and a smaller channel is the case where you probably have a call drop or a very low data rate kind of a setup. And just give me a minute. Let's get this pointer up and running. Always nice now. Good help. Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so for example, here I show the channel gain of user 1. It's going down like this. the channel gain of user 2 goes like this, and green is user 3 whose channel gain is changing. So think of this as every tens of milliseconds time scales. So what does round robin scheduling do? Well, it chose user 1 in the beginning, then it switched to user 2, and then it switched to user 3. So this is essentially the kind of data rates the base station is getting when it's transmitting to users. And the challenge with this is it's really not exploiting the channel conditions. In fact, it has to fight the channel. When the channel is very poor, the base station has to blast more power so that essentially the signal to noise ratio is very good. If the channel is very good, then the base station backs off in its transmit path so that it doesn't just have to blast power unnecessarily, and so on. And you can do much better than this. And here's how you can do much better. So this is your first example of opportunistic transmission. What it does is the following. It essentially tries to ride the peaks. So when it looks at the channel gains, and at any point in time it transmits to the user with the highest rate or channel gain. So here, for example, it is serving user 3, then user 2, the blue fellow becomes good, so he switches to the blue fellow, and then the black one becomes good and he switches over. So now you can see, instead of going like this, you're getting much better data rates. And data rates are very important in cellular systems because your spectrum is very limited. You want to get very high data rates, high spectral efficiencies. So essentially the base station, and this is essentially what schedulers in your base station do, your 3G base stations, your 4G base stations, and even your 5G base stations, essentially do this today. They adapt to the channel conditions, or they are opportunistic. That's the word you want to use. And as I said, it's part of 3G. That's really when it started. 4G uses it, and 5G will use it. There's no word. So let's look at another example, a totally different wireless system. Like I said, this topic covers many different wireless systems. This is called a cooperative communication system. So if you've not seen it, here's a brief intro to a cooperative system. There's a transmitter, there's a receiver. This is called the source, this is the destination. And normally the source would transmit power, and the power reaches the destination, and the destination looks at the received signal and figures out what the source transmitted. Sometimes this path can be blocked, or your channel becomes so weak that it's in a deep fade, as we say, and you can't decode the signal. So the cooperative relaying is a way to get around this problem. It's a way to improve the reliability of communications. What you use is, there are what are called helper nodes and relays. So I show 4 nodes here who are relays. And if this path is blocked, then the source has the option of sending the information via one of these nodes. For example, it can route it through node 1, or node 4, or node 3, or node 2. Why do you want to do this? Well, one reason clearly is robustness. If this path is blocked, as I said, you can do this. Another advantage is energy efficiency, because hopefully these distances are shorter. The total energy you spend in communicating will be much less than directly blasting information, because we know the signal energy decays with distance. So now you have choice here. You have 4 relays, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which relay should be used to forward the information? Again, the answer is you can be opportunistic. Use the relay that has the best channel to the destination. So best here is a very composite word. It would include the condition of this channel and the condition of this channel. But you can define somehow what best means. And among the 4 relays, choose the fellow who will deliver the maximum data rate or the highest SNR. So another example of this is called opportunistic relay selection in cooperative communication systems. I'll give you one more example from a totally different problem space in wireless. It's got to do with wireless sensor networks. This is going to be the future of wireless, and we all are using cellular phones quite a bit. This is the next wave that's going to come. And basically, essentially what you've got is a whole bunch of sensor nodes that are deployed in the environment. For example, in this room, they could be doing various types of measurements, chemical, pressure, temperature, air pollution in Delhi, I guess. And they would then convey that information to the fusion node, which then makes sense of what is happening. And people are even talking of body area networks now, so you've got sensors on you to monitor your various vital signs, which is then sent to an access point, and then all the data analytics happens on it there. And one of the biggest challenges in wireless sensor networks is the fact that these nodes are battery powered. You really can't run power cables to them, otherwise you simply can't deploy the systems wherever you want to. So when you've got a battery, you've got to worry about the battery draining out, just like I did. When your battery runs out, you're in trouble. And so one of the big things in wireless sensor networks is lifetime. How do you ensure that the system lives for as long as you want it to? 9 years, 10 years, 20 years is what people talk about. And the way you ensure lifetime is basically ensuring that you communicate as less as possible, or whenever you do communicate, you get the best bang for buck when you communicate. Because communication drains the battery energy. So here again, people have looked at opportunistic techniques. And the idea is basically that you've got lots of sensors who are trying to talk to a fusion node. This could be multi-tier also. I'm just showing you a simple one-tier cartoon. And you make the best sensor transmit based on And how do you decide who the best sensor is? For example, if the sensor is running very low on energy, you don't make it transmit. If the sensor has a lot of energy, you make that transmit. Another option is if the different sensors have different qualities of readings. Some readings are very noisy, some readings are not so noisy. Then you can make the sensor with very good quality readings transmit and shut up the nodes who don't have high quality readings, because essentially they're not going to contribute much to the decisions being made by the fusion node. And by doing so, there's a lot of literature that shows that you can improve the network lifetime significantly. You can actually get much better sensing from the wireless sensor. So again, hopefully you've seen that opportunistic selection, it could be relay selection, sensor node selection, mobile selection, there are many other examples. Shows up again and again and again, because essentially what is happening is different nodes see very different wireless channels, and you want to exploit that. You don't want to fight that. So there are basically 4 questions that arise when we look at opportunistic selection in wireless systems, and I'll paraphrase them. So first is, why should you opportunistically select? The 3 examples I gave you basically make the case that you should opportunistically select. And there are a lot of research papers that have been written on it for the last 2 decades. What are the performance gains? How do you quantify the benefits of opportunistic selection in terms of energy efficiency, rate, reliability of communications? For each of these, there are different performance metrics out there. The second question is, whom should you opportunistically select? So I said select the best node. What does best mean? And I'll discuss this a little bit more in the coming slides. And so it means, what does best mean? What do you mean by optimal selection? All these sort of questions arise in opportunistic selection. The third question that will arise, and this is really the part that I'll focus on the most today, is how do you opportunistically select? How do I know who the best node is? I can come up with a criterion to define best, but then you'll see that even figuring out who the best node is not easy in many wireless systems. And there are lots of very interesting research problems or algorithms that you need to come up with to select opportunistically. And the fourth question is, well, I've used opportunistic selection, but there are challenges that arise in practice. What if things go wrong? So what if, for example, the channels change with time? So by the time you make your decision and use that decision, the channels have changed so much that your decisions become outdated. How do you handle the fact that selection takes time? So this is the what if part, and this is the part I'll not cover because this requires very careful system modeling. And what I'll do today is focus on these 2 things. Hopefully you're convinced, at least partially, that you do want to do opportunistic selection. And we'll see the other second and third question. So let's get to the second question. What time should I wrap up? By 5-ish. 5 will do. So let's look at this first question. Whom to select, or what does best mean? Okay, so the answer is there is no single definition of what best means. It depends on what your system is and what your goal is, what your application is. So let's look at the examples we've looked at in the past. So what is the cellular system? So one way of defining best was choose the user who has the highest channel gain. So my definition of best is maximum of H1, H2, H3. Okay. Now, turns out in some cases this is very unfair, because if the user is close to the base station, he's going to see a very strong channel, whereas a user far away from the base station and the cell edge is going to see a weak channel. So people don't like it. Then they say we should ensure fairness. So you can change the definition of best. You can say, well, I will choose the mobile with the largest ratio of the current channel gain to what its average is. So in other words, how much does it deviate most from what it's seeing on average. So there are many different other fairness criteria also. So if you do this, you can show that every user will be scheduled equally while you're still exploiting the channel variations. So even in the cellular system, you can see there are 2 different definitions of what a best node means. If you look at the cooperative relaying system, source, destination, lots of relays. What do we mean by the best? The relay, for example, how good a relay is a function of this channel condition and also this channel condition, because the packet has to go to the relay and from the relay it has to go to the access point, AP. So now the best is a composite function. For example, people look at what are called harmonic means. If you take this channel gain and this channel gain, you look at the harmonic mean of the 2. That I'll define that as my measure of how good a relay is. Then I'll choose the relay with the highest harmonic mean. That's one way of doing it. There are some people who say, well, I'll just look at this link and define best. You can do that. In fact, if the relay is a battery part, then you might even want to include your battery energy into the definition of best. So only relays with sufficient battery energy, so this guy gets ruled out, would even be eligible for being selected. And then one of them is best. So to cut a long story short, every system has its own requirements, has its own performance criteria, and depending on them, you can define a criterion for example, here it was a max of H1, H2, H3, or max of H1 by H1 average, H2 by H2 average, H3 by H3 average. But you can define best, and there are ways to do it, and I will not go into this. So let's assume I know what I mean by best. Okay?
So in this case, you are assuming the base station does not have the CSI, transmit CSI, or
I am not yet.
you haven't yet assumed.
I am not. So if it knows H1, H2, H3, it will just choose the max of the three.
Okay.
If it doesn't, then it has to acquire it.
Okay.
And the next part will actually deal with that. Any other questions? Okay. So, so what do I mean by best, or whom to select? It's clear. Now the next question is essentially a follow-up to that question is how do I select? Okay. So now if the base station knew these channel gains, then it's a trivial problem because he can just figure out who the strongest user is and say, hey, I want to transmit you or you transmit me. But oftentimes in wireless systems, this information is not available at the guy who really needs it. For example, if the base station is transmitting to the user will know how strong the channel is because when you transmit, the user will receive a signal and how strong or weak the signal is will tell you how strong the channel is. The base station doesn't know, so he has to be told what it is. So for example, then user 1 would feed it back, user 2 would feed it back, user 3 would feed it back, then he would make the decision. Okay, so let's look at this question in a little bit more detail and I'll call it the how to select question. So I know I want the best node and I want to find out who the best node is. So here's the model I want you to keep in mind and I'll show this cartoon again and again and again. This will show up in all my slides going forward. So there are k users in a wireless network and each user has a number, a real number. I'll call it UI for user I and I'll call it a metric, a performance metric. So this could be, for example, the rate, the channel gain, the battery energy, you name it. Okay? And my definition of best is the user with the highest metric. Okay, so depending on how you define your metric, your best gets defined. And my goal in opportunistic selection is to find the user with the highest metric. The trick is, or the challenge is the following, that these metrics are local. So a user knows his own metric, but the user does not know the metric of any other node. And this base station or sync or access point or fusion node does not also therefore know the metric of any of the nodes. Okay? So he just a priori cannot say this is the best user I want to use. He has to first figure out who the best is. Now, so you need an algorithm for pulling this off, and I'll call it a selection algorithm. Now, there are some things you want out of the selection algorithm. They're kind of fairly natural things to expect out of it. First thing is you want to figure out who the best node is very quickly, because what you really want to be doing in a communication system is communicating, not figuring out whom to communicate to. So you want the selection process to be very fast. You want as much time for data transmission as possible. You want to fight channel variations as much as you can, because if you don't quickly use the selected user, the channels will change and your whole decision becomes outdated. You want to do it reliably. You do want to find the best user, not some random useless fellow. So you want to reliably find the best user. And a very important thing that comes in wireless systems, especially when the number of nodes increases, this happens in cellular systems, this happens in sensor networks, is it should be scalable. As the number of users increases, you should still be able to do this whole thing quickly and reliably, and the system, your algorithm should not break down. Okay, so these are the goals of a selection algorithm, and let's see if it's that hard or that simple. So I'll start off with a very simple example, and I'll use a statistician's analogy. This is a problem that arose in...
When you say quickly, is it the coherence time or how quickly is that?
Very good. So yeah, absolutely. So it's within, you definitely want to do it within a fraction of the coherence time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a quick definition.
That's a quick, and faster the better, because even if, so the coherence time idea is essentially your information is getting outdated, but even within a coherence time you want to be quick, because essentially selection is a waste of time. It is the part that follows selection that is the juicy part. So the more you, so if you spend half your time on selection, essentially your data rate has come down by half, a factor of half.
And you are doing for all the users?
I want to find the best user and I want to communicate only with you.
Okay.
And all the users come because one among them is the best user, who I don't know. And so my job is to figure out who is that best guy, who has the highest metric.
So the sync here knows mu1 to mu_k?
No.
Right now it doesn't.
Then the problem is solved.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He just chooses the highest user and he runs with it.
Yeah.
The problem is mu1 is known to only user 1, mu2 is known to only user 2, mu3 to only user
So
3.
then what do you mean by sync?
Sync is the guy who will then communicate to the user with the highest mu. Once you tell him who it is.
So you get some feedback from each user to the sync.
You will see exactly how, but for example, you could make each user feedback, then talk to them. Exactly.
So what are generally acceptable limits of this fraction of coherence time?
I know it depends on the system.
Acceptable. So there's
It depends on the system. So essentially there's a trade-off. Why don't we answer this question after I discuss the algorithms? It will be a much more deep answer at that time. Yeah. But sooner the better. If you could.
Yes.
Ideally 0. Immediately I want to best user. Okay, that's like what I really want. Very good. So I use a statistician's analogy. This is really what prompted the study of these class of algorithms that I'll discuss next. And since this is a classroom, I thought I'll map it to that problem. So here's my setup. There is a teacher in the class. There are students here. And each student has marks. So the numbers next to the students are the marks. So think of them as the metric. Each student knows only his marks. Yeah. And the teacher is interested in finding the student with the highest marks or lowest marks. You take your pick. Okay. Now this is demonetization era. So the more contemporary analogy is the finance minister needs to know how much money you have in your bank account. And again, you only know how much money you have in your bank account, hopefully. And the guy with the highest amount goes to jail. So that's essentially the So I hope the problem setup is clear. Okay, so there's a mapping between metrics and marks, and its information is local. That's really important. Okay, so how do you do this? Well, we'll do what is normally done in a class. We'll do a roll call. Okay, and this algorithm essentially in wireless is called polling. What does a roll call do? Teacher calls out each student's name or a serial number, and the student replies. So he will call out student 1. The student informs him that he's got 60 marks. Then student 2, 40, student 3, 82. He can't still know that it's the maximum. He will have to call out more. So he calls out 4, 15, 75, and now he knows 82 is the highest. Okay, and then this guy goes to jail. So that's essentially polling algorithm or roll call. Now, what's the problem with it? The problem with this algorithm is when the class size becomes large. There's a scalability issue. You can see what I mean. So let's assume there are lots of students. This is what happens. All the teacher does is do a roll call. He doesn't teach anymore in the class. That's essentially what happens. You spend a lot of your coherence time on just selection. There's no time left for data transmission. Okay? So now, can you do better? That's essentially the question we're asking. This is, by the way, the algorithm that's used in about 90% of the papers or models that focus on opportunity selection. So it looks like a crazy model to do, but this is essentially the default model everybody assumes on this problem. So let's look at alternate algorithms, and this is really where the problem starts becoming a lot more fun. So I'll discuss two approaches. One is called the timer-based algorithm. The other is called a splitting-based algorithm. And you will see the very intuitive algorithms, but also extremely smart algorithms. I do want to clarify right here, if you're working in this area in general in wireless, these are not the only two algorithms. There are many other algorithms. For example, if you look at wireless LANs, they use what is called prioritized random backup. So there are other ways to do this, but I'll focus on these two. And you will see over time why I want to focus on these.
So like one question.
Yeah.
Like just with the classroom analogy.
Yeah.
If I let us say if I want to know the student who has gotten good marks, maybe I will ask a question, and the guy who actually knows that question answer is going to answer that. And within one time I will be getting.
By 4:45, your question will be answered. 15 minutes. It's exactly one of the algorithms. Absolutely. As I said, this is very intuitive. Any questions? Very nice. Okay, so let's look at the first algorithm, timer-based selection. It's an extremely simple algorithm and an extremely intuitive one. The first time I heard of it, I almost hit myself on my head. I said, hey, why didn't I think of this? Here's the algorithm. There is a metric, and each node basically looks at the metric and sets a timer. Okay, and the protocol is when your timer expires, so you count your timers down, you raise your hand in the class. That's essentially the timer. Or you send a packet in the wireless communication. Now, the magic is the following, that you should set your timer in such a way that the larger your metric, the smaller the timer. How do you do this? Here is one example. 1 divided by metric is your timer, or 100 divided by metric. Scale it as you feel like. Okay, so it's monotonically decreasing. It's an inverse relationship, or in general a monotonically decreasing function of the metric. Now, why is this important? Because you can see now here square brackets 1 means the best node, this means second best node, this means third best node. So this is very standard order statistics notation. So you can see that he has the best metric, the second best, and this guy has the third best. By the very design of the scheme, the metric of the best node, the timer of the best node is the lowest, and the others are greater than that. So all the teacher has to do in the class is sit back, relax. The first student to raise his hand is the student he's looking for. Of course, all have to start at roughly the same time, but that's not hard to implement. So you understand the algorithm? So here's the protocol. All nodes set a timer. The timer is inversely proportional, or in general a monotonically decreasing function of the matrix. When your timer expires, you transmit a packet. The first packet to reach is the packet you're looking for. Very simple. Okay. So opportunistic, it's a distributed algorithm. Like everybody is doing his own thing, there's no coordination, and it does the job. But there's a catch, and this is the important part. In wireless, there's always a catch, otherwise I would be out of focus. The catch is the following. When packets are sent in the air, they can collide. Collide means basically the receiver gets both these packets interfere, and therefore it can't decode any of the packets. Okay, so he essentially doesn't know what was transmitted or who transmitted it. Okay. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So I'm again showing this metric to time. So I'll call this the metric to timer mapping. I'm mapping metrics to timers. Two things can happen. These two timers, let's look at the first and second best, because this is the guy I'm really interested in. He's the best guy. His timer can expire, and after some time the second best node's timer can expire, in which case I'm fine, because this is the packet, I can decode it at the sync or the fusion node, and I'm done. The unfavorable outcome is when these packets overlap, and they don't have to overlap 100%. Even a fractional overlap is sufficient to kill the scheme. So in this case, in this case you have a collision, and in this case the algorithm actually fails to select the best node, because at the end of it I do not know who the best node is. Okay? And so now that the algorithm can fail, the natural question to ask is, how do I make it work best? How do I reduce the probability that it will fail? Or how do I maximize the probability of success? So here success means the algorithm has found the best node. Okay? There's one more reason why you can fail, and I'm not showing it here. You run out of time. So none of the nodes transmits. Like they were just waiting for the timers to expire, but you ran out of time, so the algorithm just stopped working. So you can fail either because of a collision or just because of an idle event. Nobody transmitted. Okay. So you can see fairly clearly, it all depends on this guy, the metric to timer mapping. How do I design this? I said 1 divided by metric. Who told you that's the right thing? Maybe something else will do better. So fundamentally, the performance of this algorithm is a function of this function. And you have to choose the right function to pull off what it is. Okay. So people have thought about this. And there are many, many different functions people have used in the literature. So I'll just show the citations here, but one mapping is this metric inverse mapping. So the one I've been saying till now, timer is 1 divided by metric, or a scaled version of the reciprocal of the metric. But people have used, for example, like a linear function that is decreasing. It's an affine function, as they say. Again, larger the metric, smaller the timer. This also foots the bill. People have also used like what is called a stepwise linear function. It's continuous, but it's like every part is linear, but it's been connected. So like this. Again, it follows that rule. It's monotonic. Okay. All of them satisfy this rule. The timer, the larger the metric, the smaller the timer. Okay. Now, any guesses which will do best?
Actually, what is the logic for step actually? Other two are monotonically decreasing. So why do you create it? Why do you create a step?
Offset.
Well, I didn't think of it, they thought.
No, whatever. I mean, why did he think about that?
Offset in the start, maybe that looks to be.
Okay. So here's the fundamental question we're asking, and this is a research problem to ask. This is something we looked at about 6 years back. Which is the optimal metric to timer mapping? That's the question I'm asking essentially. Okay. So it turns out none of these guys are the right metric to timer mapping. It actually has a very, very special form, and I'll show it in the next slide. But before I do that, let me formally state the problem, at least as formally as I can in English. So there are k nodes in the system. Each one has a metric. The metrics are statistically independent. So each one can lie between 0 to 100. That's all it means for each student. Let us assume the metrics are scaled so that they lie between 0 and 1. Any other scaling will also do. This is just for the purpose of illustration. And what I ask of the selection algorithm is that it must find me the best node within a duration Tmax. Okay, so you do not have you cannot take forever to find the best node. This is your time budget for selection, Tmax. Like you want it to be very fast, right? So you would set Tmax to be small relative to core and center. And here is the physical layer model or the MAC layer model. If two timers collide within a window delta of each other, it's called the vulnerability window. It's like it started off with since 1975. That's the terminology that's been used. It's been used in MAC protocol design. If they expire within delta of each other, they collide. Otherwise, they don't collide. Okay, so if you know CSMA/CA, all of that parameters of CSMA/CA, all of that will feed into delta. Okay, but that's the only abstraction I want. And if the timer of the best node, if the packet of the best node collides with any other node, the algorithm is failed. And what I want to do is, for this kind of a framework, I want to find the optimal metric to timer mapping that maximizes the probability of finding the best node. Turns out, yes, that's what the goal is. The optimal mapping is a very, very special guy. It looks like a staircase, and I'll walk you through what it means. So I'm plotting here the metric, I'm plotting the timer, and the algorithm is as follows. So metric lies between 0 to 1. All nodes whose metric lie in this region, okay, so very close to 1, immediately transmit. Okay, so they set their timer to be 0, immediately they raise their hands. If your metric lies there, immediately raise your hand. If your metric lies in the second interval, transmit delta seconds later. Delta why? Because then there is no collision. If your metric lies here, then 2 delta, and so on. So you keep going up this staircase till you run out of time. So if your metric lies here, you transmit, and if your metric lies here, you run out of time, don't transmit. Okay. So is the structure of the mapping clear? It turns out this discrete, essentially what we are saying is that the optimal mapping has discrete timer expiries, and discrete in multiples of delta. This is the optimal metric to my timer mapping. And why does it make sense? So let me show you in one slide. It's kind of how do you prove that these things are optimal? So essentially the logic is as follows. Let's consider an arbitrary mapping. It's monotonically decreasing. Okay? So let's consider two metrics here. So one is here, one is here. So the first node is here, second node is here. What we are doing is, now let's slice this as follows. Take all the timer values that lie below delta, so between 0 and delta. Okay? So these are the guys who lie between 0 and delta. Map them to 0. Okay, so transform this metric, this function, to the following function. All the guys whose timers are between 0 and delta, make them transmit immediately at 0, leave the rest unchanged. Okay? What you can show, and I'm not showing this, but you can show is that this step can never do damage. Okay, in other words, you can see actually, in this case, these two were colliding with each other. Now I have separated them by delta, so they will not collide. In general, you can show this step cannot do any damage. Therefore, this mapping must necessarily have a probability of success that's greater than or equal to the probability of success of this. And you repeat this again and again and again, you get your slice, you get your staircase function. So essentially, the optimal mapping is a staircase function, but what's very interesting about the staircase is the stairs are not of equal length. In fact, you can prove, you can then derive these things, and you can show that the stairs become longer and longer as you go higher. Okay? Essentially, the algorithm is becoming more and more desperate as time passes, and it makes more and more nodes to transmit, so that at least somebody transmits and it can be fine. So essentially, these staircases become longer. It's not easy to see from the figure, but they become much longer. Like you'll start off small and then become much longer. Okay, and I'm not showing you the math behind it. I'm not even showing you the equations that there are some recursive equations that rise. But essentially, this is the optimal problem. Okay, so let's move to the alternate.
Delta is your packet time.
Sorry?
Delta is your packet time. So that
is not necessarily a packet time. If you do CSMA/CA, for example, then it will be much shorter than your packet time, because all your delta is essentially the time required for the other node to realize that a transmission has happened in the channel. So you could be sending a very large packet, but it takes time for the packet to reach the other node. Now, the moment he sees it, he'll shut off. The CSMA/CA says, moment he sends the channel to be busy, he will back off.
overlapping of packet won't happen if after delta time, if it is not equal to the packet.
Because he will shut off. He will stop his transmission. So the protocol is, I'm running my timer.
Okay.
If I sense the channel is busy, I will not transmit, because I know I'm already not the best node.
Correct.
So it need not be packet type.
But in that depth,
And your algorithm is aware of this largest value of metric, right? Even in this case, the
It's not aware. Where is it aware? All I know is the range.
for example, you said in the previous case, if nobody transmits,
Huh.
and that chance can happen here as well.
So it
Right?
fails.
So it is the system aware kind of implementation where everybody, for example, when you define a bucket, okay, these guys are going to transmit at 0 times. Then.
Yes, yes.
So meaning of that is you are defining like beforehand, okay, this is
Absolutely. So the algorithm is specified entirely in terms of these intervals,
right,
and these intervals can be computed. The optimal values can be pre-computed,
right.
and they are a function of the number of nodes.
so in one interval, more than one user can transmit.
Then the algorithm will fail.
Okay. Because if suppose the spacing is so less, in short interval, as you suggested, one interval there will be a probability that more than one user can transmit the same interval.
Not exactly. It turns out the intervals, as I said, the intervals are a function of the number of users.
Correct.
So they'll scale themselves. So the first thing I do want to say is this algorithm, the claim that is being made is it's optimal. Optimal, what does optimal mean? It does better than everybody else.
Okay.
It does not mean it gives you 100% success probability. Fundamentally, you cannot achieve 100%. It's a distributed algorithm. It cannot do it. But there is no other algorithm that can beat it. Okay. So I'll not show performance curves. Let's just get to concepts. So let's look at the other algorithm, and that's the thing you were interested in. So this is the splitting algorithm. So now the teacher is a little bit more active in the class. He's had coffee and come. So now he just doesn't sit back and relax. He actually starts asking questions. Okay. So now the teacher is interested in the student with the highest marks, and let's say the marks lie between 0 and 100. Okay. So the teacher, instead of sitting back, runs the following algorithm. He asks questions. The first question he asks is, all students between say 86 and 100 raise your hands. Okay, so what happens here? Nobody will raise the hand. No node transmits. So you will notice that the channel is idle. And that's useful information. Why is it useful? Because the teacher knows every student's marks is less than 86. So what's the next thing he does? You can kind of guess it. He'll say all students between 71 and 85 raise your hands. What happens now? 2 students ended up transmitting. So in the class, the teacher would see 2 hands. Of course, you won't know who's the best student. In a wireless setting, it's even worse because he doesn't even know how many raise their hands. All he knows is there's a collision. There's a sudden burst of energy, but he can't make any sense of it. Okay, so it's a collision. But even this is useful because now the teacher knows the best student is in this interval, not below. So what do you think he does? He splits that interval. That's why it's called the splitting algorithm. He says, well, anybody between 85 and 78 raise your hand. This guy raises his hand, he's got it. Okay? So it's very natural, the algorithm. Of course, you can ask now, how the hell did I cook up these numbers, 71, 81, 75? That's really where the real brains of the design lie. This is what really makes the splitting algorithm work. So you have to choose these numbers carefully. Now, here's formally how the algorithm works. So let's say again the metrics lie between 0 and 1. And time is slotted, you would specify an interval for transmission. I call it the transmission interval. If your metric lies in the transmission interval, you would transmit, otherwise you do not transmit. So let's say you see this is your transmission interval. Obviously you would start from the top and go down because you're interested in the highest metric. So you would start here and say there's an idle, that means no other node transmitted, then you will move it to the left. This will become your new upper threshold, this will become your lower threshold. And you again, so now if it's idle, you will move to the left again. However, if a collision happened, then you would take this interval, you will split it in 2 parts, and you would make the nodes in the upper part, that would become your transmission interval. And if a collision again happens, you again split, and you keep split, till at the end of the day, only one node transmits. And you can easily show that will happen. Provably, it will find the best node. And essentially, this teacher is more active, or essentially the system uses a little bit more feedback. Timer uses no feedback. You just sit back, relax, wait for the first packet to come. Here you are using feedback. So in every slot there is an outcome. It can take one of 3 possible values, idle, collision, or success. If success happens, you're done. You found the best node. In the other 2 cases, there is an update tool for the thresholds. That's the thing. Now what makes this algorithm absolutely special is you can prove the following, that if you choose your thresholds properly, and I'll tell you what properly means later, this can select the best node in an extremely fast manner. So you can show that even in the worst case, when you have an arbitrarily large number of nodes. Okay, so when the number of nodes k tends to infinity, even then the number of questions the teacher has to ask on average is less than 2.5. Okay, so compare it with the roll call algorithm. The teacher, if there are n students in the class, the teacher would have had to ask n questions before the teacher found the best student. What this algorithm says is on average, the teacher will be able to find the best student within 2.5 slots. 2.47 is actually the right thing, but in less than 2.5 questions, you will find. Now, why does 2.5 might look weird to you, but remember this is an average. It's average of 2 and 3 is 2.5. So, and it's an average. It also means that sometimes the teacher will be able to find the student very quickly, sometimes it will take time. Because if, for example, you can easily imagine a scenario where the two best students are very close to each other, 81 and 82. It will take time for the algorithm to reach 81, split it and then find the thing. But sometimes we immediately find it. Okay? So on average, so essentially this algorithm is scalable. I said scalability is a big deal. What I am claiming is even with infinite nodes, like n tending to infinity, the selection time is order 1. That's what 2.5 means. Okay? So this was first proposed in Shin and Berry in 2004 in the Infocom paper, and we worked on it quite a bit after that. Now, so what is the secret recipe? How do you choose the thresholds? So, turns out these two rules work. In idle mode, which means till your first collision happens, you're just doing a downsweep, shift left, shift left, shift left, shift left. Choose the interval size so that on average one node transmits. So, why one node? Because if one node transmits, it's success. It's only when two nodes transmit that you have a collision, and no node transmits, you wasted the slot. So choose the interval width so that on average one node transmits. For example, if the nodes are uniformly distributed, the metrics are uniformly distributed between 0 and 1, you can show the interval length should be 1 divided by the number of nodes to ensure this. So 1 divided by the number of, so 10 nodes, in the marks lying between 0 to 100, the interval length should be 10 marks. That's essentially what it is. And once a collision happens, whatever be your interval, cut it into pieces. Exactly cut it in half. So half the nodes on average transmit. So once a collision has happened, you set the interval, and if a collision happens, split it again in half. If an idle happens, take the remaining half, cut that remaining half in half, and so on. Okay. Now it turns out half is not exactly optimal. It turns out to be 2.12 instead of 1 divided by 2, but let's forget that. You can show all these things pretty carefully. But if you do this, you can prove scalability. Okay, that it takes just 2.5 slots to find the best node. It's remarkably fast. Anyway, so with that, again, I don't want to show performance curves because then I have to spend time on the model and all that. But that said, as I said, this is not. There are a lot of very interesting research problems that have arisen. We've been working on it for 6 years. We continue to work on it. We still have one PhD student, one master student working away on these algorithms. There are lots and lots of questions that arise when you put these algorithms to work in practice. Okay, so one of the things is, I kept saying, I need to know the number of nodes. Do I know how many students are there in the class? Many cases you don't know how many nodes are there in a system. Some of the nodes might shut down. Some of the nodes might run out of energy. They might shut down when you go to sleep. So, can you devise algorithms when the number of nodes is unknown? That's one interesting research problem. There are another class of algorithms where you're not just interested in the first guy, but also first guy and the second best guy, or the first best, second best, third best. We call it the subset selection problem. Okay, you want to find the gold, silver, bronze, not just the gold. That's like the common analogy. So, and the subset selection problem arises in cooperative relaying. For example, if you do beamforming, if you have multiple relays forward information simultaneously, here you're trying to make the best few relays beamform, the best 3 relays, the best 4 relays beamform. So this is called the opportunistic subset selection algorithm. Turns out these algorithms generalize to that. Now, you can even ask or think about combining the splitting and timer algorithms. The timer algorithm is nice because it's a very low overhead algorithm. You just sit back, relax, don't ask any questions, no feedback, you find the best node. The splitting algorithm requires feedback, collision, idle, success in every slot by slot feedback. But it's guaranteed to find the best node, whereas the timer scheme is not guaranteed to find the best node. It can fail. So can you combine the two and get the best out of it? The answer is yes, you can do that. So you can come up with hybrid selection algorithms. You can, bring in more concepts into the timer scheme. So I said, the problem with the timer scheme is when a collision happens, the algorithm fails. Now, again, going back to the classroom analogy, you can find the best node even if there's a collision, like as follows. So not only do you raise your hand when your timer expires, you also shout your marks out. And higher the marks, the more you shout. Okay, so in other words, you transmit power control. If you transmit at a power that is proportional to your marks, your metric. The larger the metric, the larger your power. What does that ensure? So if the second guy has marks well below you, your SINR is high enough that you can decode the first one. Okay, so you can combine transmit power control with the timer scheme, and you can show this really speeds up, makes the algorithm much more reliable. Okay. And again, much more scalable. Now you can also ask other questions, which is like, why are you so obsessed with the best node? Maybe the best node is not the guy I'm looking for. I'm looking for a node who's good enough. Okay, so I don't want the student who has the highest marks, but I'm looking for a student who has got an A grade, whatever the A grade is. So anybody will go so long he's got an A grade. So in other words, the objective of the optimization problem is no longer guaranteed selection of the best node, but something else. For example, I want to maximize the system throughput. Again, turns out they completely change the algorithms, or the optimal structure completely changes when you ask these questions. So again, so I'm just raising out questions because this is really what research in this area is. And there are many other questions you can ask. It's just up to your imagination and your understanding of wireless systems to come up with these questions. Okay, so hopefully I've given you a flavor for how to select, two ways to do it. There are many generalizations of this. For example, if you look at LTE, if you're working on LTE, long-term evolution, which is your 4G Reliance Geo standard, then there are more difficult problems that arise that are not addressed by today's standard. So I'll give you one classic example. I have 5 minutes. Okay, I can wrap it up with that. So turns out the way the LTE physical layer works is it uses OFDM, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. And what OFDM essentially does is takes the bandwidth and breaks it into lots of narrow subcarriers. I'll call them subchannels. Okay. So think of these as subchannels. Again, this is the cartoon. There would be 1,000 of them. I've only shown you 8. And these are the users. And also turns out that you do not get the same data rate or the same channel gain in each subchannel. You see what is called a frequency selective channel. So different subchannels, you would see different gains. So think of these as rates or gains. Okay, so you would see a variation. There's correlation, but there's a variation also. It's not flat. How flat it is depends on how much multipath you've got in the channel. So you have this, and now the goal of the user, of the base station, is to schedule users, assign for each subchannel a user, the best user. What do I mean by the best user? The user who has the highest subchannel gain, or you think of this as bits per second per hertz, the highest rate. Okay. So what would the base station do? He would look at 14, 1 and 6 and then realize 14 is the highest and therefore select or schedule user 1. He would look at this, again it's user 1. In this case, it would become user 2 and so on. Okay? And this is the schedule that the base station comes up with for every transmission. Every millisecond it does this. Now the challenge is very simple. To be able to come up with this schedule, the base station needs to know this whole matrix of numbers. Okay? And it's a lot of information that the base station needs. Turns out, user 1 knows this column vector, user 2 knows its column vector, user 3 knows its column vector. The base station doesn't know any of them. So in principle, you would have to feed it all back to the base station. Then the base station can schedule. Okay? Can you do this in a better way? If you feed this all back, all you will do is feedback, you'll never end up transmitting. You just shut down your system, your uplink will get saturated. So it turns out, this you can ask the same questions. I'm giving you what is called the generalization of the selection problem. It's called vector selection. So these are the subchannels. This is the SNR or rate, and it's a frequency selective channel. And now, instead of each user having a metric, it has a vector of metrics, like one for each subchannel. And your job is now to find the best user for each subchannel. Okay, so it's a vector selection problem. Turns out, LTE doesn't do anything remotely smart as this. What LTE does is it makes every user transmit. So essentially, it does roll call. Every user is allowed to transmit every 10 milliseconds CQI, channel quality information. But obviously, the system works and it cannot feed back so much information. So the way LTE solves this problem is by drastically cutting back on what information you feed back. Okay, so by a factor of 100, by a factor of 1000, depending on how you measure it. For example, one of the tricks LTE uses is, it says don't feed back the channel gains or rates for every subchannel, only feed back the channel gains of the best 2 subchannels. So shut the others down. This is called the best end feedback scheme. So for example, these are the best 2 here, best 2 here. Because anyway, it's interested in the higher channel gains, the lower guys, who cares? And then it gets this partial channel state information, and based on this, it schedules. There are many other dirty tricks they do in LTE to cut the feedback over it down, even below this. But these are the kind of things it does. Now you can ask, is this the right way? Is roll call the right way? Or can I do it better? So it turns out you can do much, much better than roll call. I will not discuss the algorithms here, but you can bring these ideas, every student raises his hand, he raises 10 hands maybe because there are 10 sub-channels, but somehow you can come up with algorithms to even solve this problem. So splitting can be applied even for cutting feedback overhead down in overview systems. Okay, so let me summarize. I'm pretty much out of time, so I'll stop here. So hopefully you've got the following. So this was entirely about this problem called opportunistic selection, which is dynamically reacting to variations in the channel state or battery conditions or you name it in a wireless system. And there's a lot of variation that happens in a wireless system. You don't want to fight the variations, you want to exploit them. That's what opportunism is. And there are many different algorithms for doing this. I gave you examples of two algorithms, timer and splitting based. And essentially what they do is they don't make all the nodes transmit. They kind of make the best node only transmit, except that you don't know who the best node is. So occasionally the second best node may end up transmitting. But that's pretty much what they achieve. And because they achieve that, they're extremely energy efficient, scalable. And that's the reason why they work. So let me stop with that. If there are questions I can take.
Any questions?
So,
Hope I answered your question.
I don't have. Yeah, you have a question.
so in your case, you assume that at a time only you need to select one user, means to transmit.
Yeah.
But ideally for the base system, there are like lot of users they need to select.
Absolutely. So for example, the lot of users comes because there are lots of sub-channels.
Yeah.
For every sub-channel, you still want one user, unless you do multi-user mining.
But then your time is still 10 milliseconds, right?
Correct.
So when you have a lot of users, you need to spend a lot of time on the feedback.
Not necessarily. So again, I'm not going into the algorithms for doing this. You can again show it's order 1 feedback override, even with a lot of users. You can do it. You can do it. It's splitting does the magic.
So in the previous slide, when you discuss this algorithm, like the guy with the highest metric will be selected for the transmission. So is this algorithm fair? Because there will be users there in the system who will not get transfer transmission.
Yeah. So this is this question about, so the algorithm finds the best node. Whether it's fair or not is a function of what your metric is. So for example, if your metric is the channel rate, it is unfair because the user close to me would get rate. But I will change my metric to be, for example, a proportionally fair metric. The metric would be the rate divided by the average rate he's got so far. So if you're getting scheduled very often, your metric will come down. So fairness can be incorporated in the metric. Not in, it doesn't. It's not an onus on the algorithm.
Okay. Got it.
So when you compare these three algorithms, splitting, timer, hybrid, throughput is one. This fairness is also compared, or how do you compare the fairness part in these three?
So turns out fairness will get guaranteed. So it depends on what your metric definition is. If you define a metric to be the proportional fair metric, fairness is guaranteed. You can show in the following. Fairness is a very broad word, but you can prove that every user will get scheduled with a probability 1 by the number of users. So on average, you will get as much time as everybody else. But round robin algorithm also does that, gives everybody equal chance. It's a very communist algorithm. But this guy is smarter because he'll schedule you only when you're good and still give you the guarantee that you'll have equal opportunity. So you can measure it. We don't even show it because it's kind of clear from the metric. What you would measure these algorithms is either probability of success, the time required to find the node, or the eventual impact on system, which is system throughput. How much time am I actually spending?
How much rate you can gain?
Throughput is fine. Throughput is amazing.
Did I answer your question?
Any more questions? Thanks a lot.